When a player gets drafted, there are a lot of people who feel like they've won the lottery. Of course, the player in question feels excited because they get to continue playing football at the highest possible level. They can set themselves up financially for the future, and they finally get to realize their lifelong dream of making it into the NFL. The team that drafted the player feels excited because they feel as though they got a player that's going to help them win football games and make them better. But one of the biggest winners on draft night, when a player gets drafted, that would be the agent. For the most part, all of these players have to be repped by somebody. The agent is out there working the phones, funding the private workouts and trainers that a player has to get ready for the draft, and helping out with everything behind the scenes. And when the player gets drafted, if that player is a high first-round pick, not only is the player going to be making a lot of money, but so is their agent. On a rookie contract, an agent can receive roughly a 3% commission. And while that might not seem like a lot, when the Tennessee Titans drafted Cam Ward with the first overall pick at the 2025 NFL Draft, he signed a contract worth about $48 million. You get 3% of $48 million, and you're winding up with about $1.5 million. Just like that, you're a millionaire off of one name getting called. There are a lot of moving parts to the draft, and the agent is one of them for sure. So imagine that a player gets drafted high, and the agent walks away with $1. Seriously, you're an agent for a player. You put in all of that work with contacting teams and giving them the information and making sure all of your T's are crossed and your I's are dotted. And you walk away with one measly dollar. Well, this man right here is Dick Leftridge. When people talk about the biggest bust in the history of the Pittsburgh Steelers franchise, this man is always near the top of the list. And it's not hard to see why. He was drafted by the Steelers in the first round of the 1966 NFL Draft with the 3rd overall pick, and played a grand total of 1 season with the team, where he ran for 17 yards and 2 touchdowns. The first pick in the draft was Atlanta Falcons linebacker Tommy Nobis, who was a 5-time Pro Bowler, an All-1960s team member, and a man who should absolutely be in the Hall of Fame, as he was not only one of the best linebackers of his era, but might be the greatest Falcon of all time. The second pick in the draft was Los Angeles Rams offensive lineman Tom Mack, an 11-time Pro Bowler who is widely regarded as one of the greatest guards of all time, and a man who is in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And the third pick was, well, Dick freaking Leftridge, with his 17 yards and 2 touchdowns, which I'm sure is exactly what the Steelers had in mind when they drafted him. His NFL career started off poorly when he showed up to camp very overweight, and that was a bad omen of things to come. But perhaps even more underwhelming than his NFL career, of which there are so few highlights of, was the money he gave to his agent after the draft. Because this is one of the most bizarre stories you'll ever hear when it comes to how much different the draft was back then than it is today. Because I guarantee you that something like this could never happen again. Because this is the story behind Dick Leftridge, and the man who might just be, considering the circumstances, the worst agent in the history of the NFL draft, or at least the worst when it comes to money. Make sure you hit that like button down below, subscribe, hype up that video, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single video that we post on the channel. Because we post every single day on here about the weird and the wacky history of the NFL, with stories like this one that you may not have heard of before. So if you like that sort of stuff, then this is definitely the place for you. Thanks in advance for liking and subscribing, and for hyping up the video, and for helping us grow this community. And with that in mind, let's talk about the agent, who is definitely the anti-Jerry Maguire. But before I talk about that, and the insane deal between Leftridge and his agent, we need some context to understand just who Dick Leftridge was. And apologies in advance because, as you might be able to tell, there are not a lot of college highlights available of Leftridge at West Virginia, especially in high quality, seeing as this was the mid-1960s, and college football footage was extremely scarce back then. So I'm going to be reusing these clips of Leftridge at West Virginia over and over again, because that's literally all that's available. However, you'll get an idea of how good of a player he was. Leftridge is a West Virginia legend for a lot of reasons. For one, he was the first African American to ever sign a scholarship to play football for the Mountaineers. So just for that, he's an absolute pioneer. But aside from that, he was a darn good player. He was an absolute bulldozer at fullback who was not only great at setting blocks, but was a guy who never went down on first contact. Over his 3 seasons with the Mountaineers, he scored 21 touchdowns and averaged close to 5 yards per carry, including a senior season in 1965, where he had 774 rushing yards and 8 rushing touchdowns, which was the 3rd most in the Southern Conference. He was named to the All-Southern Conference team as a result of that. Leftridge was going to go high in the draft. The questions were to what team and to what league. And when the Pittsburgh Steelers drafted him in the 1st round with a 3rd overall pick in the NFL draft, and when the expansion Miami Dolphins drafted him in the 4th round with the 26th overall pick in the AFL draft, Leftridge was in a perfect spot. Or should I say, Leftridge's agent was in a perfect spot. Remember that back in the mid-60s, it was a fantastic time to be a player financially, because you never had more leverage. If you were really good and you were coming out of college, you had 2 leagues coming after you and trying to acquire your services. And in the case of this man right here, who again, there aren't a ton of high-quality highlights that I can show of, but in the case of Dick Leftridge, he was taken highly by 2 teams in 2 different leagues. Miami could probably offer him more playing time as an expansion team and better weather, while Pittsburgh could offer him more prestige and a chance to play close to home, since he was born in West Virginia, went to high school in West Virginia, went to college at West Virginia, and eventually in 2004, at the age of 59, way too young, was buried in West Virginia. But when you have 2 teams vying for your services, a bidding war ensues, with the NFL and AFL notoriously getting into big-time bidding wars around draft time. That was one of the reasons for the eventual merger. Eventually, Dick Leftridge decided to sign in the NFL for the Pittsburgh Steelers, spurning the Miami Dolphins. And according to his agent, he got a healthy contract from it. We don't know the exact number, but it was high. For some perspective, Tommy Nobis, who was taken 2 picks ahead of Dick Leftridge in the NFL draft that year, and also had a lot of competition from the rival AFL, got $700,000. So we can assume that Leftridge got less than that, but somewhere in that ballpark. He was getting a lot of money and was getting way more than the average American was making at the time. I'll put it that way. So there you have it. Dick Leftridge was an NFL player, was rich, and his agent was absolutely incredible. His agent helped Leftridge get taken by not 1, but 2 teams with premium draft picks. His agent worked the phones to get as much money for his client as possible, and his agent got him a healthy NFL contract. So how much did Dick Leftridge's agent get from this deal? Leftridge was making 6 figures in the NFL, which was a big deal back in 1966. So surely, his agent got a good commission out of this, right? Well, for all of his hard work, Dick Leftridge's agent got $1. Seriously, Dick Leftridge's agent, for negotiating this deal, received $1 measly dollar. Now, to be fair, this is 1966, so you do have to adjust that for inflation. So that's $10, which, yeah, that's still below the minimum wage in many states. But imagine that. Imagine representing an NFL player, putting in all that work behind the scenes, getting him to be taken 3rd overall, signing him to a big six-figure contract that comes out to way more than that adjusted for inflation today, and getting $1 out of it. Which raises the ultimate question. Who was his agent? Who was the guy that was only getting one measly dollar as a result of this? Well, here's a plot twist that you might not be expecting. But if you're a baseball fan, you might recognize this name immediately. Because the man who was Dick Leftridge's agent was this man right here, Bob Prince. And yes, if you're a baseball fan, you might recognize that name, because that is that Bob Prince, as in the man who was the announcer of the Pittsburgh Pirates from 1948 until 1975, and then eventually in 1985 again until he passed away shortly thereafter. He's widely regarded as a local legend and one of the best radio announcers in Major League Baseball history, and is a member of the Baseball Hall of Fame, receiving the Ford C. Frick Award in 1986 for his broadcasting work. And in 1965, during the offseason, he was the man negotiating the deal for Dick Leftridge. And to say that this is bizarre would be putting it lightly. Number one, Prince had no ties whatsoever to West Virginia, which is the school that Leftridge went to. In fact, Prince graduated from Pitt, as in West Virginia's biggest rival. He wasn't born in West Virginia, he never lived in West Virginia, he never worked in West Virginia, and even though West Virginia isn't too far away from Pittsburgh, there is genuinely nothing I could find about Prince in West Virginia outside of this. Number two, Prince wasn't an agent full-time. Dick Leftridge and West Virginia wide receiver Bob Dunleavy, who was drafted by the Cowboys in the 6th round that year, were the only two guys he represented. He didn't represent anyone else before this draft, and didn't represent anyone after this draft. And if he did, it was not reported on, because believe me, I dug high and low and went down quite the rabbit hole when I found this out for the first time. In other words, imagine if Joe Buck, who did not graduate from Ohio State and graduated from a rival school in the same conference, was representing Ohio State safety Caleb Downs in this upcoming draft. That's sort of what this was like. Just completely out of left field, and unless I'm completely missing something, there was no rhyme or reason for this to even happen. For what it's worth, Dunleavy also gave Prince $1 for his services, so Prince was up to a whole $2 for his work. Prince just decided, as an off-season project, in between seasons of calling games for the Pirates, you know what? I'm going to represent some football players, and then dip right after. I know the sports agency business back in the 1960s was nowhere near what it is today, but I'm going to take a wild guess and say that agents for other players who were taken high in the draft, especially considering the bidding war that went on between the NFL and the AFL, leading to more outrageous contracts, receive way more than $1. Just a hunch. And obviously, it's not like agents today where their only job is to be an agent. Prince didn't need the money, and we can assume he was being paid a nice salary by the Pirates to be the voice of the organization, and he was being paid for other gigs like speaking roles, seeing as he was a prominent figure and prominent voice in the Pittsburgh community. So it's not like this was a guy who was strapped for cash, who was getting robbed high and dry by a player. But why this was a thing, especially at that salary, and especially considering the fact that there is no connection whatsoever between Prince and West Virginia, I guess we'll never know. To say that the NFL draft has evolved since the 1960s would be putting it lightly, because I don't know too many agents who would be representing first-round picks today and highly touted players for $1. Plus, the process of becoming a certified agent has changed significantly, to the point where I highly doubt that someone like Bob Prince could become an agent. It's not something you just do in your free time on the side. But it makes for an insane story nonetheless. A player gets drafted to the Pittsburgh Steelers and is represented by the announcer of the Pittsburgh Pirates. Meaning that if this was just a few years later in 1970, both the player and the agent would be going to work together in the exact same stadium. Because in 1966, if you were an NFL player and went to the dollar store, apparently you could buy yourself an agent. Check out our live streaming schedule for the next few days. We're live every single day on this channel, whether we're covering a sporting event or playing GeoGuessr or just taking your requests. So make sure you like and subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single time that we go live and so that you can join this community. Also, thanks to all our members and our Patreon supporters who get exclusive perks like their name of the end of each video, members-only Q&A streams, and cool emojis to use on videos and during streams. See how you can join this community and become a member or a Patreon member by clicking the link in the description below.